Remember, there you go. The people want a God they can touch and see and feel. So does Moses, interestingly. And that's where we pick up the exchange. After Moses moves his tent outside the camp, disgusted with the people, it's a Marlene Dietrich moment. I want to be alone. And Moses says really the same thing that the people of Israel say. Show me. I want to see. Where are you? What are you? Face to face. Put them to put them. And from that exchange and what follows it, which we don't usually connect to it, which I think is crucial, we might just glimpse God. Or we might understand how Moses' experience reflects ours and how that helps us find our way home. Home with a capital H, like holy home. We're going to start right here. I'm going to go around, right? I'm going to start with Lloyd. I'm going to make him read a little text, if that's okay. He's probably looking at some other text because he's already cross-referencing, right? I know Lloyd. But we're going to read some text. You know the Koshi, and realize that we're reading the end of chapter 33 and the beginning of chapter 34. Please.
And the Eternal One said to Moses, I will also do this thing that you have asked. You have truly gained my favor, and I have singled you out by name. He said, oh, let me behold your presence. God answered, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim before you the name eternal. The grace that I grant, the compassion that I show. Continuing.
Can't hear you, Jeff.
Oh, can't hear? Can't hear. Wait a minute. You know what? I realized, I don't know why. Hold on one second. Let me just see. I'm so good with this. Microphone, Realtek, high definition, same as system. Let me see something. Hold on one second. Is this anything different? Or, I mean, Lloyd, try it again from the beginning.
And the Eternal One said to Moses, I will also do this thing that you have asked.
Anything better or no?
No.
Okay, great. All right. I don't know. For some reason, it's not allowing me, maybe because, I don't know. It's not allowing me to change the mic system, and I don't know why. Usually it does. Maybe because of Virginia's sharing. I don't have a clue. But at any rate, I'm going to read the text because I'm right here. Okay. And the Eternal One said to Moses, how's that sound?
That's good.
Perfect.
I will also do this thing you have asked, for you have truly gained my favor, and I've singled you out by name. He said, oh, let me behold your presence. God answered, I will make all my goodness pass before you. I'll proclaim before you the name eternal, and the grace that I grant and the compassion that I show, continuing, but you cannot see my face, for a human being cannot see me and live. And the Eternal said, see, there's a place near me, station yourself on the rock, and as my presence passes by, I will put you in a cleft of the rock and shield you with my hand until I pass by. Then I will take my hand away, and you'll see my back, but my face may not be seen. The Eternal One said to Moses, carve 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I'll inscribe upon the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you shattered. Be ready by morning. And in the morning, come up to Mount Sinai and present yourself there to me on the top of the mountain. No one else shall come up with you. No one else shall be seen anywhere on the mountain. Neither shall the flocks and the herds graze at the foot of this mountain. So Moses carved 2 tablets of stone like the first, and early in the morning, he went up on Mount Sinai as the Eternal had commanded him, taking the 2 stone tablets with him. The Eternal came down in a cloud and stood with him there, proclaiming the name Eternal. The Eternal One passed before him and proclaimed, Adonai, Adonai, a God compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness to the 1,000th generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, yet not remitting all punishment, but visiting the iniquity of parents upon children and children's children upon the 3rd and 4th generation. Moses hastened to bow low to the ground in homage and said, if I have gained your favor, O my Lord, pray, let my Lord go in our midst, even though this is a stiff-necked people, pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us as your own.
Wow.
So this is the moment. And the question is, what does Moses get based upon his request? He says, let me see your presence. Let me behold your glory. And he gets something. Is it the answer he wants? And how is that received? Arnie.
Can't hear.
What he gets is a perpetual separation that cannot be fully consummated. Let me just see something. Let me see. Very incomplete, very dissatisfying. Okay. Okay. I'm going to relate everybody's answer unless I can get Carlos to help me here. Hold on 1 second. Let's just do this. Wait 1 sec. Remain calm. Don't anybody leave, because I know you people. You're going to be off to golf or something like that. Wait a second. Wait a second. Wait for it. And of course, I'm recording this, so I look like a schmendrick. Wait 1 second. Carlos, one of these is your number. Let's see. Let's see if there's a Carlos's number. Let's see if there's a Carlos. Hello? Carlos, my mic, I can't switch the mic to the echo system. I don't know why. You want to come look at it for a sec?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Thanks. It's good to have people. It really is good.
Absolutely.
Especially if you're inept. So God gives Moses an answer, to his request. What is that answer? What does he receive? Bob, call.
Can't hear.
So, yeah, Bob Coulter is saying this is a tender moment, and it's followed by not such a tender moment. So it's a little atypical maybe of Torah. So look at this, Carlos. So right down here. Now, Virginia is sharing. I don't think that should make a difference because I can still control the participants. But look, usually it says, right, echo canceling sound system. Why doesn't it say that? Any idea?
I was trying to work on the sound, but we're not really sharing. I'm not co-hosting, so
Maybe.
I can do it.
So I wonder if this is. Hold on 1 second. I have a funny feeling. Hold on 1 second, folks. I'm just going to try one thing. Remain calm.
Sure.
So if I feel like maybe I'm on Virginia's. Can I be on Virginia's thing? No,
I don't think so.
But I'm on mine.
No, you're not, but I'm not co-host. I'm just sharing my screen, my
Normally,
screen with you.
yeah,
Okay.
normally it says that I could speakers Realtek high definition. So normally it says I can change.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't say I could change. Is there anything on there that's not on? No.
No, everything is on. I can see it from here.
Yeah. Any idea? Audio settings?
What about the camera?
What about the camera? The camera's
Camera is
lovely.
working.
Camera's fine. Audio settings, let's see. Let's just see for a second. Remain calm. What do you see, Carlos? Anything?
Jeffrey, why don't you just try
Yeah,
unmuting?
That's not gonna be any different. I don't think. Because system
Or
is,
try rebooting.
right?
Yeah.
Say it again? Slide the volume over? Yeah, I don't think it's gonna do anything, but let's see.
No.
Right? Somebody say something from the crowd.
Why don't you
Hello.
reboot it?
Not you guys. You guys, you know what? You people are, it's crazy. Wait, you Jews, not you. I hear you just fine. I want this crowd. Michael,
Oh,
did you hear Michael just say that?
Yes.
You heard Michael say hello, how are you?
No.
no.
Jeffrey, go on sound and
No,
take.
I'm on sound. I'm on sound.
Okay,
I've done it.
So go take away. I don't have access myself because I'm sharing the screen. Take away high
High
definition.
definition audio, I did that.
Yeah. You did. Okay, it doesn't work. Okay, I don't know then.
It's on same as system, but usually it tells me go to the voice echo canceling thing, and it doesn't tell me that now. Michael, say one more time. Hello, how are you?
Yeah, don't cancel the echo.
Can you hear Michael? No.
No.
No. All right. All right. So, we're just going to continue and I will be the, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, wait. Came on. What did you do?
Unplugged.
All right. Carlos did the amazing thing of plugging it and unplugging it. And now we're going to be fine. We're going to be just fine. All right.
That's
All right,
what I
I'm
told
sorry.
you to do.
That's
I'm-
good. Mazel tov.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay. Now Bob Colt is going to say what he said again.
Is God speaking like a parent here to Moses, saying, I love you, but, I'm going to spank you too?
Is God's, did you hear that?
No. No.
Yes.
No, yes. Great. I love that. These
I'll try it
Jews.
again.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
God speaking like a parent here to a child, saying, I love you, to Moses, who's a stand-in here for Israel. I love you, but I'm also a disciplinarian, as I must be.
Did you hear that, guys?
Yes. Not an echo.
So now it's on. And I don't care if there's an echo, Tom. Okay? You're going to have to go to a better barbershop. All right?
Good.
So,
Let's go.
So God is speaking like a parent to Moses. Thanks, Carlos. God is speaking like a parent to Moses. And in a way, this is, we can't go to the amusement park, but I'll buy you cotton candy, and it'll be like we're there. So there's some compromise here. So I know that folks had their hand up. I saw Lisa and then Jane.
So a couple of things. When at first God is telling Moses that he's gained his favor, and Moses asks in return to behold his presence. Later at the end, later at the end, Moses says, "If I have gained your favor, it's like walk with me, like." I think like Lech Lecha, like wanting God to go with them.
Yes. Which
and
interestingly, at least God had already promised that. So Moses
Exactly.
is something God already promised.
God already favored Moses in the first place. This is nothing new.
No. But what's nothing new is God is asking, Moses is asking
and-
for something that God already said, I'll do. Go ahead.
And I just had one other thing also that God seems very prideful, proclaiming his own name. And then, but he also seems to know himself, because he's saying at first he's compassionate and gracious, and then punishing third and fourth generations. So he knows what he does.
So God is aware of God's job description. I like that. About God being prideful, listen, if anybody should be prideful, I think it's God. That's just my feeling. All right, I had Jane, then I had Susan Sharrock, then I had Michael.
It is interesting because God appears in two different places or two different times in this section. In the first section, here he says, I think it's 22, yeah. Up at the beginning, he says, I'll make all goodness pass before you and I will proclaim the name eternal. And then he says, oh no, that's only one place. But I think it's kind of really interesting because he comes by twice, but this first time he doesn't say anything. But the second time he proclaims, he comes down and proclaims himself. So the first time Moses is sort of like doesn't really see him. And the second time it looks like he says, the Eternal came down, verse 5, the Eternal came down on a cloud and stood with him there, proclaiming the name Eternal. So the first time it looks like he's sort of just passing by. And the second time he's being much more, much more apparent.
Yeah, so Jane, your insight is raising the question, right? If there's no early or late or time sequence in the Torah, which the rabbis teach us, right? Ein mukdam ve'ein mu'achar b'Torah, is this the same moment? Or is 34 the setup for the end of 33? We don't know. But boy, if it is, that changes the dialogue, right?
I I also have a question, Rabbi.
Gotta hold on to your question. Jane, hold on to your question. I've got two other folks. Susan Sherry.
Well, I find God very protective. One, he puts him in the cleft of a stone, and which reminds me, of course, of Jacob and Isaac, and very caring about putting his hand and shielding him. And as close as you can get, God is getting as close as he can get to him by touching him with his hand. It's so beautiful that he wants a relationship on that level with a human.
There's some beautiful. There is some level of intimacy and really tenderness, as Bob said, in this moment, right? Michael Feinberg. Michael, just gotta unmute.
Unmute.
Okay, you got me, right. No, I think that actually this raises more questions than it answers. And it raises those questions because the text itself doesn't quite know. You know, these various modulations of God's presence. First kavod, then tov. Later, we learn about God's face. We learn about the Shekinah. That somehow we're seeking, and the writers of this are trying to somehow get to grips with the nature of our relationship to God. And this is actually comes to the fore when God himself proclaims. I mean, this idea, which is all borders on the absurd, of God shouting out, Adonai, Adonai, I am. So somehow one's got to interpret what is actually happening. What is really happening here? We haven't got God up there shouting out to the people. I cannot believe that. So somehow there is an awareness of this divine presence, which is a radiation or something. But the rest about, you know, a forgiving God, etc. This is a layer which has been added. Why has it been added here? Surely because this is the Parsha of the golden calf. Because here we've got to assume our sin. This is also part of our relationship to God. And somehow the text is grappling with this, and it doesn't give an easy answer. I don't think, you know, or the commentators go one way or another. The whole point is it's all uncertain.
Yeah, so I want to underscore your point which you made at the start, which is there's a great ambiguity here to what transpires. Where's God? Where's Moses? Who's talking? What's the revelation, right? But there's a lot being played out,
Yeah,
right?
but Jack,
Jack, hold on a sec, Jack. I had Gail. I don't know if Gail still has her hand up.
Okay, I'm here.
Yeah.
My fascination with this part is that God always appears in the space between the solids. We're talking about Moses being placed between two solids. I always imagine this as the two tablets of the law, and that you don't see God in the solids, in the tablets of the law and the 10 commandments, as we were always taught, but you see him in the void, in the space between. And
that's great.
Like silence in music, the importance of the emptiness.
Yeah, the notes between, right? So where is God present? Great insight, very mystical, Gail, right? I have Zebi, then I have Jerry.
So, so this is in the Hebrew. You can't see if you don't read the Hebrew, but in verse 19, it says in the English, you will pass before me. But the Hebrew really says, I will pass before your face, panecha, face, okay? And then in verse 20, it says, a human being may not see me, but it doesn't say see me, it'll say see my face. So in both places, the text is talking about something to do with face, and the difference between God seeing your face and you seeing God's face. But face is interesting.
Excellent. It is all about the interface, isn't it? Jerry.
So I want to pick up on the last two comments and just add I think there's something really important in the directional movement of God in these two sentences, and the fact that we Moses, and I guess the Israelites eventually, cannot see God coming to them, but we can see God moving away. And maybe the overriding theme here is the challenge. God is moving away from the people. You can see my back. And the challenge is to keep up and to and not let God get away. He's not making it easy on us to see him more.
Right. But I love your
Yes, but then you know what? Jeffrey?
Yeah.
I think we're talking of many different facets here. Faith, the figure, faith, the belief in God, the contractual agreement between Moses and God, all kinds of, it's all a goulash here. And we are, as humans, are trying to get something tangible, which is impossible because we're dealing with an intangible God. And so we are trying to reconcile a faith physically with a faith which is believing in God. And that is extremely difficult.
Yes. So you are underscoring what I think what everybody has said and what Jerry just said beautifully, which is, right? It's almost like Jerry, you'll appreciate this. It's a misdirectional play in football. In football, that's what it is. You know, it looks like the QB's going to pass right, but he's rolling out the other way, but he passes left. Is God doing a misdirection here? Because, as Jack just said, it's supposed to be very difficult. And as Zev said, maybe God can see our face, but because of our faith, we can't see God's. And yet, we experience God's presence, as Gail said. Last comment, then we'll go into the remnants. Clarence.
Presence is one phrase or one sentence, one word that's used.
Yeah.
It says, "I will make all my goodness pass before you."
Yeah.
So that's a definition, perhaps. Then it's not past. Then in the next section, 34.
Yeah.
5. The Eternal stood with him there.
Stood with him there.
Did not pass. He stood. Proclaiming. But so, presence, my goodness. What is it? The word goodness?
Yeah, that's the word. So Zeb pointed this out, which is right when he was talking about face, which is Moses says, "Let me behold your glory," literally, kavodecha. And God says, right, "I'll have all my tuvi, my goodness, pass before you." And then we get this other scene. So I'm going to submit that this is one moment. And if it's one moment, it changes everything. Because this is, in fact, the response that Moses gets. And it's the experience that Moses gets. But it's not as clear as we think, as both Michael and Jerry and Jack have underscored. So we're going to the remez to try to understand what does Moses experience. And I'm not going to do all the remez because there's way too much. I'll skip around a little bit, right? If Judy or Barry...
Rabbi, can I ask my question
before
you go?
Yeah.
I just, the only question that I really had is, if this is the same moment, why is God appearing to him, I guess you could say twice? Because at 23, it says, "I'll take my hand away and you will see my back, but my face may not be seen." But then in 20, or 5 rather, he comes down when Moses, after Moses carves the tablet of stone. So I guess my question is, why is he appearing twice? If he's appearing twice at the same time, why is he appearing twice at the same time? And if he's not appearing twice at the same time, what's going on?
Right, so if you allow yourself not to be bound by a chronological understanding, you won't have the problem. Don't worry about it, right? Or it could be, in fact, God's response that happens the next day, if you want to think of it chronologically. Right? God says, "I'm going to let my goodness pass before you," and as Clarence implied before, chapter 34 is the experience Moses has in the cleft of the rock, as Gail said, between those stones, which is beautiful. So now, right, Judy or Barry, if you unmute, I'm going to have you start, because the first question is exactly Clarence's question. Moses asks, let me behold your kavod. What is kavod? First part of it. Judy.
Moses saw that his requests were being accepted, so he added one more, to see God's presence.
By the way, that is not Judy, but I like Barry too. Right? So Barry, yes. So Rashi says it's presence. However, the Sarna, Nachum Sarna, is going to give us a whole bunch of different smorgasbord possibilities. Go ahead, Dan.
Sarna, Hebrew kavod, often signifying God's self-manifestation, some outward visible sign of his essential presence. At Sinai, God's kavod appeared as a consuming fire atop the mountain. What then was Moses's request? Rambam understands the phrase figuratively. Moses asks for an intellectual perception of God's essential reality. Ramban, by contrast, interprets the words literally. Moses actually requests a glimpse. Moses pleads for an exclusively individual experience, one that is close at hand.
Right, and the Ramban actually says, in a comment that I quote, but not going to read the whole thing, what does Moses mean? He wants to see the great glory, the clear glass. The innermost vision you want, you cannot see. Right? The clear glass? That's what he wants to see? No, that's what God will let Moses see. And so there's something very real here. The contrast, and of course it's a contrast that happens all the time. Rambam, Maimonides, is the Neo-Aristotelian philosopher who says, this is all a metaphor.
Exactly.
Seeing God means understanding God. Moses wants perception, depth perception on how God works in the world. Ramban says no. Ramban's a mystic. He wants to feel God close, intimate. Clarence.
This might sound like a stupid question.
No, there is no stupid question.
Absolutely.
Why
Only stupid answers.
Go ahead.
Why does Moses want this?
Why does Moses want this? Clarence, stupid question. No. That's a great question, by the way. Why? Okay. Why does Moses want this?
I mean, we just went through the calf.
He just castigated the people because of the calf.
He killed thousands of them.
Yeah. There was a bad moment in camp, as Bob noted, right?
But why? Why is this Moses' seminal moment?
Yeah.
Moses wants...
Does anybody, I know Zebby and Elizabeth have their hand up. Do you guys want to answer to Clarence, why does Moses want this now? Why does he need this?
Why not something different?
Right.
Why not ask for something different?
I have an answer, by the way, but anybody want to answer Clarence? Why does Moses want this and need this now? Maybe Ellis has an answer for Clarence? I don't know. I see you guys have your hands up. That's why I'm helping. I'm asking.
I think God wants it as much as Moses wants it. Ooh. I think it's just they both want something. And if I'm just going to make my comment since I'm speaking, I think it's the first time I understood why Orthodox people, when they refer to God, they say Hashem. There's an equivalency here. It's in Hebrew.
Yeah.
In verse 17, God says to Moses, I will know you by your name. And then in verse 18, God says to Moses, I will announce myself. I will reveal myself by my name. Yeah. So there's an equivalency here. He knows Moses because he knows Moses' name. And he says to Moses, you will know me by my name. And in Judaism, it's all about language.
Right.
It's all about seeing.
Baruch Hashem, blessed be thy name.
Always Hashem.
All 13 attributes are us. So so this is, however, a knowing, the desire to know. Remember that.
Yes, and Jeffrey, I'm thinking about it. After the golden calf, he's disheartened with his people. He's disheartened with his brother. And this is a way of making a connection, lift his spirits in a way nothing else could possibly.
So maybe he needs his spirits lifted at this moment. Maybe. Lloyd?
There's a schizophrenia going on.
Did you hear what Lloyd said? There's a schizophrenia going on. Okay.
Makes sense.
You go back in time to the Jethro portion.
Yeah.
Exodus 20.
Yeah.
God's delivering the sound and light show.
Yeah.
The people are terrified. The people go ahead and say, you know what, you deal with him, this is freaking us out. Moses isn't happy, but he lives with it. Next chapter is the golden calf. People go, we want something tangible. This God who is out there, but is not, but who's simply transcendent as opposed to immanent. That's kind of freaking us out too. We'll go ahead and deliver up a golden calf.
Right.
Moses, in a sense, is trying to get to where the people didn't go, which is not create a deity in his own image or in his own want, and yet he's saying, I'm willing to step into the pitch.
Yeah.
If I'm willing to step into the pitch, can you deliver?
Yeah.
And God is going,
Right, right. So there is a schizophrenia or a dialectic tension between the people, Israel, who go this way, and Moses, who wants to go that way. They're running away from God's presence. Moses is trying to run into God's presence, into the pitch, so to speak. I'm going to call on Ellis before I go on. Ellis.
Okay. Sometimes I always ask myself about why I do whatever it is that I'm doing. And this, to me, is clear that to just pull away from the story, the people writing this are moving backwards in time. They're trying to derive, like, if we are here, how did we get here? If we believe this, how do we believe this? And if you go backwards in time, you derive the only possible thing that could have happened that brought us to this place. It's very similar to, if you guys are familiar with the Higgs boson, which people unfortunately refer to as the God particle. But it's how is it that we can derive to see something that cannot be seen, to feel something that cannot be actually felt, but felt in some other way. So they invented the largest machine in the world to try to find the thing that cannot be seen, that cannot be heard, but they know is there because we are here. We are here, therefore, something had to precede us being here. What is that?
And so maybe, I love that, Ellis. So maybe Moses is asking the question because he wants, as any good actor, what's my motivation for this scene in leading the people forward?
Jeffrey?
What do I have to do to know you? I gotta know, and it's obvious to me, but give me something. And so what is the response, as Clarence asked? What's the difference between kavod, glory, and my goodness? So goodness passes by. What is goodness? Well, Sarna thinks it's a legal term. Maybe, maybe not. Right? Right? Steve Marcus, are you around to read? Look at on the commentary. See the altar? See altar?
Yes, I do.
Give us altar, Steve.
Altar, God offers instead of glory to show Moses his goodness, a manifestation of his moral attributes as divinity. But God's goodness is not amenable to human prediction, calculation, or manipulation.
Right, and I'll just read the Hertz right after it because it's an extension.
God's moral attributes, the revelation of love and mercy, is the source of the sublime principle of imitation of God. You shall be holy, for I am holy. Mortal man, however, cannot imitate God's omnipotence or eternity. That side of his nature, which is beyond human comprehension, is also beyond human imitation.
So both Alter and Hertz are saying, what is it that Moses gets? What does God grant? A moral definition of how God is manifest in the world. However, right, and because we want to copy that, imitatio Dei, as Latin would say. We want to imitate God. That's what the Gevurot says, right? We want to do that, right? just like God is, right? So we want to be like God. However, we're not going to be omnipotent and we're not going to be eternal. Don't get confused. Clarence.
So the next question I have is goodness versus my back.
Yep. Perfect. Yep. Yeah. So what is, by the way, Clarence is like my prompter, right? So goodness versus my back, right? So, the weird thing here is that God's response, and I love Gail's image, and we're going to go back to it, Gail, in a little bit, but what is it that Moses gets, right? Well, in a way, God's back, which is the next verse. No human being can do this because of right? So we get some manifestation, but it's God's back. But really it isn't God's back. Right? Does anybody who have their hand raised, which is Yvette or Michael or Elizabeth, have a comment that relates?
Yes. I would say what constantly comes to my mind is, why does God care? God is God. Why does he care whether, Moses appreciates him or understands him or not, or her? It's God. So why does God take the trouble to answer?
Because God without people does not exist.
So one motivation, as Jack is hinting at, is if we're in covenant with God, God has to give us a little bit.
Exactly.
A covenant is a two-way street. So there has to be some sense of how God is present for us. However, we're not going to get the whole enchilada. That's impossible.
Jeffrey?
Yeah.
We are, to a degree, it's a recreation. God likes to start all over again after the failure of the first encounter with Moses, and then Moses coming down, and then we have the golden calf and everything else. I think that both Moses and God had to think it over. They were given a second chance here, and they both did whatever they needed to do to make the second chance work.
Yeah, and I would say this, Jack. I would change one word of yours. Only not recreation, but it is a renewal.
Okay, whatever you say.
And the reason God cares, as Zev said, it matters as much to God, is because God is in relationship. Remember, Moses convinces God, don't destroy this people. Not a good idea.
Exactly.
Right? I'm sorry, I know I have a lot of people raised their hand, but I want to play this out in the text and then we'll go to comment. So Clarence's, question is, okay, so we get to see God's back? Really? Look at Yvette Gorovich. Can you read for me a little? And then I'll let you comment. Can you get, so what is this? The Ralbag says, what does the Ralbag say?
Moses requested that he might actually see with his own eyes the presence of God.
Where are you?
Rambam, right?
No, the Ralbag. Sorry. Ralbag. See right there?
My back, meaning the events that I leave in my wake.
Because what does actually it say? You will see my achorai, my afterwards. So God, the text doesn't say back. The word for back is gav. It is not a bodily element. It is a time conception. You will see my after effect, or my afterwards. Now, Yvette, read the Chatam Sofer, the great chassid. Yvette, you got that one for us? Right under the Rambam.
You will see a hara. It is not referring to God's body, but rather to our perspective on time. A period of time can only be understood when viewed in context. So too, we are only able to recognize how God works in retrospect.
Ooh. Go ahead, Clarence.
I still think the last four words of that aren't clear to me.
Mm-hmm.
I can't figure out, even looking back, how God worked.
So Clarence makes a clear and fair point, which is that really an answer? Because I can't figure out how God works looking back. I don't have the manual for that. right? I have Arnie, then I'm gonna go back to Ibn Ezra, and then I'm gonna call on people.
So sitting here listening to this dialogue, I'm asking myself, how do I relate to this? And the problem I'm having is the kind of intimacy that I would like to have is impossible. So maybe I'm looking in the wrong place. Maybe I should be looking at what's going on around me, the mundane, the sun, the moon, the relationships that people have. Is that the most we can expect? Is that the best we can expect?
So Arnie's asking the right question, and it only took him 48 minutes to say this, which is, how does this relate to our relationship to God today? How does this animate how we experience God? Is the sun and the moon the best we can do? Can we ever get to an understanding, as Clarence is saying? I don't know, right? All right, all of a sudden something just became different. There we go, thank you. So if we go to, I'm gonna call on somebody, right, Yvette, by the way, did you have a comment that I didn't let you make?
Yes. So asking to see the glory and saying, you can't see my glory and live, for me is a really teachable moment. He's once, the dialogue is once again pulling back the veil of eternity and saying there will maybe a point in time when you understand and see all the glory, but for now, look for the goodness, look for me in the interactions, in the spaces between, in the aftermath.
Don't look for the glory. Don't stare in my face. Don't look at the sun. Feel the light.
It's a very Jewish teachable moment.
I think it's a transcendent, wholly teachable moment for all of us. I love that. I love that. I have Bob Coulter, and then I'm going to call in Michael Feinberg and Lisa.
You can look forward to Job, where the voice of the whirlwind says, you don't understand me, you can't, you want to know me,
Yeah.
you can't.
Yeah, Bob Coulter is echoing the Job, which is, you can't know me. So Clarence is right. Why? Look at, you see the Robert Alter under 33:22:23, Bob Coulter, you see that? Like a cloud, which covers the light of the sun. You see that?
So where is this on the page?
It's under the hertz, near the top of the page or down below a little bit, under 33:22:23.
God offers, instead of glory, to show Moses' goodness.
No. It's like a cloud which covers the light of the sun.
Oh.
Ibn Ezra.
Ibn Ezra. Like a
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. No. I'm sorry. You were right. Imagining the deity. It's the altar underneath that.
The altar. Oh, imagine the deity in frankly physical terms. Imagining the deity in frankly physical terms was entirely natural for the ancient monotheists. But such concreteness does not imply conceptual naivete. God's intrinsic nature is inaccessible and perhaps also intolerable to the finite mind of man.
We are too limited, finite, to understand the infinite. But we can experience it in some way. Lisa, a quick comment, then I gotta go to the commentary.
I was just going to say, it's interesting that all these climactic moments of interactions with God occur on Mount Sinai, and starting with Abraham and God, and then going with the lightning and the thunder, and now this request to see God.
Yeah, it's not incidental that it happens on Sinai or at Sinai, because that is the place of revelation. And you remember, we just built a Mishkan, which we were told by Casuto is a portable Sinai.
I was wondering why they picked Mount Sinai.
Whole nother drash, whole nother story. Maybe we'll do it as a Koshi this year. So what is Moses' response? What does Moses answer from God? All my goodness shall pass before you, which is exactly what it's called in chapter 34 when he's in that moment of God's revelation. And as Michael Feinberg pointed out, it's ambiguous. We don't know who's talking. Take a look. Chapter 34, verse 5. You see it? Then the Lord came down in a cloud, and he stood there with him, and he called out the name Adonai. Who's he? Which he? Which one? The pronouns are intentionally unidentified. And now you're going to see what the rabbis did, right? Right? Who's reading for me? Michael, you want to read a little bit? Michael Feinberg?
Oh.
The Rashi.
The Rashi, wait a minute. Yeah.
It's under 34:5.
Okay, we render it as does the Targum Onkelos, and he, Moses, called out with the name of Yad-Heh Vav-Heh.
Right? So Moses calls out the name, or the super commentator on Rashi himself, the Gur Aryeh, a generation later, says.
Okay, according to the Tosafos, it should read, and he, God, called out the name.
It wasn't Moses, it was God talking, you Shmendrick. And now the Abravanel, a century later.
It is actually Moses who proclaimed the name, shrieking it out when he felt the wind carry him away from God and place him in the cleft of the rock. Can I just comment something? I want to take up, I think it's really, it's relevant here, something that Zev said, which I think is really brilliant, which is about the equivalency between God saying, I have known you by your name, and then afterwards, he himself, God, proclaiming his name. Because the name Hashem is both the way we're able to, in some sense, identify, discern God, and it's also the way we cannot, it is also a barrier. We only have names, we only have language. Don't try to go past. We can give it a name, we can give you the attributes, but don't think there's going to be any mystical union with my being. Not till you're dead, not while you're alive, buddy. So just keep going.
Because you have to be.
Can I just? I want to comment. I want to comment on Michael's comment, on my comment.
Okay.
So, this is, verse 5, and the English translation is, "Then the Lord came down in a cloud, and he stood there." This is Hebrew again. There in Hebrew is Sham. Sham is Shin Mem. It's the same as Shem. His name stood there. And then Moses responds to him by calling out his name. You know who calls out God's name? You know who calls out God's name? On high holidays, in the temple, in Yom Kippur, right? The only one who could call out God's name is the high priest. This is the first time that God's name is being called. It's Moses and it's a high priest. That's how important the name is in our religion.
And Zevi, you don't even know how great what you just said is, because what do we call out on Yom Kippur at that high holy moment? What words do we use? This verse. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed Ve'emet. We use this verse. We use this description of God's name at the holiest moment of our year to try to get close. And Zevi, I love that. What stands with Moses? The shame, Sham, the name. So now understand that there is an interface. I'm going to use that word intentionally, right? Between the two, as we go to 34:6-7, right? Because all my goodness passes before you. I'm just going to say it. That is the 13 attributes of God's mercy and love, which are detailed as follows, right? I'm going to call in Bob Coulter, and then I'm going to make a point that I can't forget to make. Bob.
All the theophanies in the Bible seem to be God talking to people. The mystical union with God doesn't seem to appear. The Jewish mysticism seems to be a post-biblical phenomenon.
All of the theophanies in the Bible are God talking. So how do we get close to God? What's the closest we get? Is it staring at the moon and the stars? Or is it the words? Is it somehow God's presence in and through the dialogue or the words? Keep that in, but don't miss what Abravanel said. I'm not the first person to think this is one moment, Jane. Abravanel said it. When is this name called out? Adonai, Adonai? When does that name stand there on the mountain? Look, when the wind carries him away from God and places him in the cleft of the rock. It's the same moment. This is the response of seeing God's after effect, right? And I just read one more. All we need is one more, right? Look at the Rambam. The Lord passed over Moses' request to see him face to face. Carol Scheffler, give us the Lord passed.
The Lord passed over Moses' request to see him face to face. Instead, Moses perceived Achor, God's back. This refers to the 13 attributes, the knowledge of the actions attributed to Adonai, not God himself.
So somehow, Moses' response of experiencing God is that God's name is proclaimed as a presence, as a manifestation of that experience. So how do we know God? And by the way, what is God's name? God's name is becoming. How does God become manifest in the world? A God compassionate and just, forgiving the iniquity, like you golden calf people, etc., etc. So somehow Moses wants the experience. He needs it, maybe as much as God needs it, and this is the upshot of that encounter, which I love what Gail said, is in the space between. All right, Lloyd.
This has gone on since practically since creation. You go back to Genesis, and there is one line, and then it was that the people began to invoke the eternal. This seems to be a constant. People want to know God, or at least call out to him, but also have difficulty getting close to him and be with them.
People, Lloyd just I want to underscore it, people want to know God, but it's hard to get close to God, right? It's hard. And what is the word know in Hebrew, biblically speaking? Yada. We want to get in bed with God. The Adam yada et Chava ishta, and Adam knew his wife Eve. That means he had sex with her and they conceived a child. We want to know God that intimately. Lloyd.
And going back to the Genesis text, it's 2 verses, and Adam once again was intimate with his wife, and she bore him a son and gave him a name, Seth. Over there, it uses yada for intimacy.
Right.
And then it skips ahead, and it says, it's in that next verse where they begin to invoke the eternal.
So, the idea of coming close to God, of invoking God, of connecting to God, runs from the very beginning of Genesis. Moses has the chutzpah, because he's close after all, to ask, hey, by the way, how about a little punim to punim? We'll have some schnapps, we'll sit down, we'll talk.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Hold on 1 second, I'm just going to let Lloyd finish his comment because I interrupted.
And Moses becoming close here follows after God saying basically, I'll wipe them out and I'll start with you. And Moses goes, no, thank you. If you go there, take me out of your book.
Yep.
And so, I mean, that's serious dialogue.
Yep.
Take me out. I mean, that's chutzpah.
Yeah, it is chutzpah. But is this a request for Moses himself, or somehow for the people he serves? Right? That's the question, right? So now I'm going to go over and I'm going to
Rabbi,
Jane,
I have
go
a
ahead.
question.
Yeah.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering that after the golden calf and Moses breaks the tablets, whether Moses needs some kind of reassurance of God still being there, that God has not abandoned them. Because when you're in a relationship and you have an argument or some kind of an upset, all of a sudden you're like, well, am I still in a relationship with you? Are things still okay?
Yeah. I think that's a smart and thoughtful statement. Moses wants affirmation. He's just moved out of the camp. He's just had this really difficult encounter with the people. No question. I go Dave Zabel, then I'm going to go to Michelle Greenberg and Shayna to read an amazing drash,
I was just wondering with Rambam, with Maimonides, what are these 13 attributes he's talking about?
It's the text of chapter 34, verse 6, 7. You count them, there are 13. Those are the same 13 attributes that Rambam wrote a treatise on faith about. So, in essence,
in the Guide for the Perplexed, is that what that is?
Yep. So now we have the drash, and it really does premise on Jane's question and on Zev's insight, which is maybe God needs this as much as Moses. But what is Moses getting in response? What is this exchange really about? All right, start Michelle, and then Shana, you'll pick it up.
It must have been a great comfort to Moses, and not only a disappointment, that God turned down his request to see God's glory. The wind was presence enough on top of the mountain much of the time, the wind and the voice in the wind. Every visit of divine speech exhausted him now. Even the words that did not demand that he do battle, climb higher, challenge Pharaoh, rebuke the Israelites yet again, or simply, on some days the hardest, endure. He had long expected that his people would not satisfy their God. They needed to see what no one could see. They could barely hear what he listened to daily, quiet, or pounding in his head. The shofar blasted loud, and they shrank back at the sound. God thundered from the top of the mountain, and they retreated sensibly for cover. It could not be any other way. Only he heard the words through the noise. They saw the sounds. He knew what they did. They strained hard to get more, but only he came away with the sense of it. And now, with only his life to lose, just himself and God alone up there, the two of them alone again, he had asked to see more, to know the end, to hear past the thunder. His request for the people had already been granted. God's face would go with Israel. The countenance would accompany them. He could have rest from worry over the people's fate in the absence of the countenance. But from his own hardest travail, he had not been promised rest. The work was not the hard part. What he needed was respite from the mystery, from not knowing God's ways, God's intentions, where God was facing, where time was taking them. He, of all men alive, had the best chance to know this. God had not actually said that he couldn't, at least not yet. Maybe there was a chance to find out. So he had burst out with it directly. No more circling around the point of what he most desired. He had asked for what God had never granted anyone. Oh, please let me behold your glory. There, he had voiced it. Not a plea to have the ways of God made known to him as before, but a prayer to have the glory of God shown to him. The request took his very breath away. God's assent might well have meant that he would never breathe again. But what was breath for God's breath alone loaned him for a time, if not to fill it with this longing? With all his being, he wanted to touch the glory of God's presence, to hear from inside and out the light of the divine countenance. The longing he bore for God at the peak of the mountaintop on which God had descended was well nigh unbearable. He craved an end to it. And God answered him.
Wait a minute. Right? So, oh my God. Right. First of all, what a great climbing inside Moses' mind and heart. What a great, this is Arnie Eisen, right? The Chancellor Emeritus of JTS, married to my dear friend Ace Levine, Professor of Bible at HEC. So now, Shana, God answers him. What is God's answer for him, and how does that play out for us?
And God answered him depth to depth, no. What Moses wanted, he could not have. You cannot see my face, for man may not see me and live. No. Relief and disappointment joined. The answer itself would have to be enough. He would have to go on as human beings do, without knowing how things were. This interview was at an end. And then Moses suddenly heard the rest of what God had said. God had not turned down his request, but rather answered it in a way that any human being could never have imagined. I will make all my good pass before you, and I will proclaim before you the name, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and the grace that I grant and the compassion that I show. Moses would not see God's face while the voice sounded and all God's goodness passed. He could not watch the scene from a distance, take it in, grasp hold of it. He could not see the glory. No human being could be the subject of such a sentence, command that verb, have God as an object. Not the Israelites down below with their calf, nor he up here with all of his entreaties. The he wanted would never be his. But God, he now realized, had promised more than he had asked, not less. As God's goodness passed before his face, he would hear the speech of God filled by the will of God with the sound of God's own name. And as if that were not enough, more than enough, this would happen as he clung to a rock, a place God prepared by God, clung to it with God, held in place by God. God's hand pressed against him would shield Moses from what he could not see and live as he was whole God's glory. God would not stand revealed before him, but God would hold him tight, shelter him, touch him from head to toe. The glory would pass on, and Moses would see again, whether his eyes were open or closed. He would see inside and out. He could look then all he wanted, when he would no longer need to look. The face of seeing would be proof enough of God's presence. The tingling of his flesh would bear witness from that day forward. Every pore of his skin would remember the divine palm that held him. The wind rushed Moses as the blood rushed to his head. Events hurtled faster, but still not fast enough. His head ached with the anticipation. It would ache far more, he knew, when the weight of all that light pressed in on him from God's side as the cool of God's mountain squeezed him from the other. All this God had promised. It would soon come to pass. He was, for a moment, content.
Oh my God! What a great understanding, right? And powerful. What I mean, we could underscore so much. I'm just going to throw this out there or underscore. What he needed was respite from the mystery, from not knowing God's ways, God's intentions, where God was facing, where time was taking them. He wanted to know that his life had meaning. He wanted to know that he was heading in a purposeful direction. He wanted to know that his leadership of the people of Israel was going to actually come to fruition. All this stuff he'd gone through was for something bigger, something eventual that would give some meaning to everyone. And what does he get? Which is so beautiful and so, it really is as intimate and close as we get. The third from the last paragraph, which is, I think, that is intimacy. Yada, right? That is yada, right? God would pass by, but God would cling to him, hold him in place, his hand pressed against him, shielding him, grasping him, right? God would hold him tight, shelter him, touch him from head to toe. He is held by holiness. That is, right, the awesome hope and desire. That's as close as anyone gets and lives. But so God's love was so overwhelming in that moment, he would never forget it, and he would never have to look again. It's not about looking. It's about feeling somehow God's presence, which is transcendent. Right? Before I go to the end, I'm gonna call on Virginia to start us out here with the Sod. Any comment on the amazing Arnie Eisen and how he sort of tries to grasp what Moses experiences in that moment?
Sorry, Jeffrey, my sound is not that good, so you keep cutting off. I'd rather, did you ask me to read or just to put the sound on the, if I'm doing this, my sound is not that happy.
All right, so it's okay. So you know what? I'm going to ask Karen Ryder to read. She's next on my list. So in a minute, Karen's going to read, but Clarence had a comment.
So I'm looking at verse 9, chapter 24, verse 9. And at least Moses uses language after this, or with this experience. And he says, if I have gained your favor, O my Lord, pray, let my Lord go in our midst. So he was asking him not just for the experience that he just had for himself, but for all of Israel. Correct?
Yes, yes, Clarence is underscoring actually what was pointed out prior, which is, and Lloyd pointed it out, right, that Moses experiences this very intimate personal moment, and then what does he do? Asks for forgiveness for all of Israel, and God's next words, crucially,
No, but such that God will do the same for Israel that what God just did for Moses.
right, so what is God's response to that? It's the next verse, which I didn't include. I don't know why, I should have included verse 10. It says, Vayomer, Hine Anochi Korek Brit, Neged Kol Amecha, hereby I make a covenant against all and with your people. With, God says, okay, we got a covenant.
And that follows what had preceded this, which was God saying, you know what, I've had it with you people. I will have my angel, my messenger, bring you into Canaan and deal with your enemies. But I'm washing my hands, I directly am washing my hands of you.
Yeah.
And this sort of becomes a backdoor for God to come within the camp.
Yeah, so this could be a response to God's disgust with this no good for nothing stiff-necked people, and to say, listen, you've experienced me intimately. You're going to be my go-between with them. We got a covenant, it's all cool. But I don't want to be too involved with them, right? Maybe. Or maybe Moses is echoing, right? I saw Lisa and Ellis still have their hands up. So Lisa and then Ellis.
Just with the irony, eyes and peace, it's like the relationship with God is sort of like unrequited love, but here it's getting some requiting or whatever the word would be for that.
Yes. In a way, it is unrequited love. In a way, it's as close as any human being can get and live. It is where life and death touch, where finite human beings and infinity border. And it's all through the word, the name, that is proclaimed. We just don't know who's saying it. Is it Moses' realization? Is it Moses' aspiration? Is it God's affirmation? We don't know. Karen Ryder, Aviva Gottlieb is going to take us one step deeper.
The center of gravity in the narrative is the moment when Moses asked God for a personal revelation. Please show me your glory. And God replied enigmatically, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim before you the name Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, and the grace that I grant and the compassion that I show. You cannot see my face, for man may not see my face and live. Moses' desire to see God's glory is one God denies him, but it is translated into seeing my back as the narrative continues, merging into an auditory experience, God proclaiming his 13 attributes. To hear these is, in a sense, to see God's back. Rashi offers the cryptic midrashic translation. He showed him a knot of his tefillin. The tefillin knot is a knot on the back of his head. What Moses is to see after God removes his obscuring hand. Through this image, the Midrash conveys Moses not seeing the mystery, the total knowledge in which time and change are blindingly effaced. What Moses sees in the aftermath of presence is its effects, what it leaves in its wake. The tefillin knot is the trace left by his presence. As a knot, a kesher too, it binds, it forms a link between the divine and the human. Only this form of relationship, separating and uniting, is presented to Moses's gaze.
Right, so Gottlieb Zornberg is saying brilliantly that what does Moses actually see and experience? He experiences the binding knot, or the feeling of covenanting, of being connected to a presence that is somehow tying us together, and somehow so far beyond us, it ties everything together. And now, Karen, finish it up.
The desire to see God's face is at the same time the desire to be seen, to be transformed by God's gaze. The mystical desire is not only to see the face of God, but to become that very face in the visual confrontation. Moses is evidently denied that very transformation of face. He experiences God only by indirection, from the darkness of the cleft, the cave, from the language of prayer. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum. He must accept the distance, the difference. To encounter God's face is only possible within language, in a speaking with him that respects difference. The difficulty of this encounter is in its humbling effect. The only union possible is in relationship. It is therefore significant that this unqualified encounter with God leads Moses to a full solidarity with his people. Pardon our iniquity and take us as your own. This is the moment when Moses makes a profound choice to speak out from the side of the human. It is at this moment in relationship that God renews his covenant.
So the personal encounter, right, leads to a national or an all Israel affirmation of connection, of
Jeffrey?
relationship. Yes.
What is the alternative here? If Moses is the only representative of God in front of the people, since God only faces the people through noise and clouds and everything else. So if Moses fails, like Aaron did, we have no deal anymore. So it is in the interest of both God and Moses to create a deal that makes sense and that is successful. Otherwise, we don't go anywhere.
Yes, but it sounded like in verse 17 of chapter 33 and following that Moses was asking a personal request of God in a very intimate, personal way. The fact that he transforms it and spins on a dime from experiencing that Adonai, Adonai, that name, right, to an affirmation for all Israel is quite compelling, right? I guess Steve Shapiro.
So this reminds me of a situation where, I try to equate it to an everyday situation. I try to equate this to an everyday, how we live our lives. That's okay. When I leave Chevrah, I always try to put it in the context of how this works in our everyday life.
Okay.
And for me, when you learn about someone very ill that you love very much, or somebody that you know is not going to live because of whatever reason, it's that same moment when you're asking God, why or how. And it becomes that intimate moment of connection, of trying to ask his name in the sense of, how could this be? And it's inevitable. I mean, it's just the cycle of life. But it's that connection where you're trying to see his face and trying to connect.
You want to know God's ways. Here's the irony, Steve. The Bostoner Rebbe, not me, Isaac Levi Yitzchak Horowitz of Boston, Hasidic Rebbe there, said, what did Moses ask him? He was using the Chatan Sofer. He wants to know why the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper. Moses wants to understand why life isn't fair. And what is the answer? Can't tell you, but you can see my after effect. You can't know how the world works from my perspective, but you can gain a sense that it's still sacred, even with all the suffering from yours. Clarence.
So just on the tangible side, directly from this moment, you get the 2 tablets. That is an direct after effect.
Yes. Yes.
And that is the covenant. And that, I think, is probably, the narrative culmination. Or evidence.
You get, so Clarence just says something really, I think, on point. You get the after effect. What's the after effect? It's a new set of tablets, right? Is it God's name? No, but it certainly is how God is manifest in the world. It is kol to thee, all my goodness, not passing before you, but written right in front of your eyes. So when Moses brings down the new tablets, notice written by Moses, not by God, it's exactly what Gottlieb Zornberg is saying. What is she saying in the end? She said, oh, the only union possible is in relationship. Wait, she says it someplace else. Wait a minute. To encounter God's face is only possible in language, in a speaking with Him that respects difference. What is she saying? We see God every time we step inside God's words and try to understand them. We see God, see in quotes, every week when we study Torah, and when we listen well enough to think outside of the box and beyond our preconceptions and learn from each other. So somehow we are held in holy embrace. Where does Chevrah Torah happen? In the cleft of the rock. It's a very powerful thought and a powerful sort of, so God's presence is palpable. Somebody every week says something. I hate to say it, this week it might be Zev, right? What I'm going to think about for the next hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. It's going to hit me tomorrow, and I'm going to say, yes. You know, God stands with him there, and there in Hebrew is shame, not just shine. So what is standing with us? God's name.
I'm on Chevrah. I'll speak to you later.
Okay.
He passed by.
Yeah, God passed by. Anyway, I want to say we didn't answer it all here, but I think this is the essential question. How do we come close to God's presence? I have never read as wonderful a drash as Arnie Eisen's on what Moses experienced. You know, I think it's so inside Moses' being and heart. What do we want to experience? We want to feel like God's holding us, even at the hardest moments. We want to feel like God's hand is there, God's presence, right? Wayne, last comment.
Yeah, I think what's beautiful here is you see Moses is developing this growing personal, intimate relationship with God. And he's really setting forth an example for the people to really follow, to pursue God, to really go after him.
Yeah. Moses is a model in relationship. And it's wonderful that his relationship seems so personal. Because maybe he can inspire other people to have that relationship as well.
I'd like to say, even though we are on Zoom, the feeling that is engendered, that comes between us, is enormous. And so there is no separation, even in time and space between us. That's so beautiful.
Underscore the word between. Thank you, Susan. As Gail said at the beginning, it's the betweenness that counts. Folks, have a wonderful Shabbos. Stay warm wherever you are. If you're in Paris, I hope it gets cold. And thank you, Virginia, for sharing the screen. Have a wonderful Shabbat Shalom.
All right.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Bye, Mike. Bye, Sue.
Bye.
Bye, Jen.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.